One of the things I want to talk about is that I want us to do a little bit of some thinking about the comparison of our first reading of the story of Samuel. Because Hannah and Samuel are lifted up as such important models of service and obedience to God. And there are things about Hannah and Samuel that then relate to the story of Mary and Jesus. And so just a couple things I want to just remind you of is that, remember Hannah was barren and prayed for a son. And she promised the Lord that if she had a son, she would dedicate him to the Lord. When she became pregnant and gave birth to Samuel, she took him to the sanctuary. They did not yet have a temple in Jerusalem. This is, those of you who know your biblical history, this is pre-temple days. And when he's about 7 years old. Now, from then on, she sees him once a year when she brings him that new little tunic. Kind of a strange way to raise children in our way of thinking. A little boy there in a big cold stone sanctuary with the priests and the people who make food for him and take care of him. But Samuel becomes a leader and a prophet. And again, if you remember the story, he is the one who, as a prophet led by God, finds David, the shepherd king, and anoints him to become the king of Israel. There's a lot more to the story than that, but that's a very important one. And so they are lifted up in Jewish history, continue to be lifted up, Hannah and Samuel, to illustrate faithful and dedicated servants of God. And you notice at the very end of that reading, it says, Samuel grew in stature and in favor with the Lord and with the people. Now, as we're preparing to read the gospel, we're going to read about Jesus, the only story we have of him as a young boy. He's 12 years old. Really, we know children at that age, 12 years old, they're starting into adulthood. There's Jesus. Well, now he is the subject of prophecies before he is born. He's also raised by a mother who has inside information about what is to happen to her son. Now, Mary wasn't barren. She had been given this gift of a son. And there is a contrast. Jesus is being raised at home. He wasn't sent away. By the time of Jesus, there is a temple in Jerusalem. The temple in Jerusalem actually has been rebuilt by that time after the Babylonian exile, if my memory's serving. Maybe it's the Assyrian exile. I'll have to have Pastor Meg check me out later. But Jesus is very familiar with the temple, what it stands for, why you go to it. So the same, in many ways, the same thing, that he is growing up learning this. And he seeks out the temple, and again, you notice what it will say at the very end of the story. So now I'm going to step up here and read the gospel story. It is from the second chapter of Luke. Glory to you, O Lord. Now, every year, Jesus' parents went to Jerusalem for the festival of the Passover. And when he was 12 years old, they went up as usual for the festival. When the festival was ended and they started to return, the boy Jesus stayed behind in Jerusalem, but his parents did not know it. Assuming that he was in the group of travelers, they went a day's journey. Then they started to look for him among their relatives and friends. When they did not find him, they returned to Jerusalem to search for him. After 3 days, they found him in the temple, sitting among the teachers, listening to them and asking them questions. And all who heard him were amazed at his understanding and his answers. When his parents saw him, they were astonished. And his mother said to him, "Child, why have you treated us like this? Look, your father and I have been searching for you in great anxiety." He said to them, "Why were you searching for me? Did you not know that I must be in my Father's house?" But they did not understand what he said to them. Then he went down with them and came to Nazareth and was obedient to them. His mother treasured all these things in her heart, and Jesus increased in wisdom and in years, and in divine and human favor. This is the gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, O Christ. Well, here we have this wonderful story of Jesus. He's 12 years old. We know 12-year-olds, and they're starting to feel very independent, and yet he gets lost. And I don't know if any of you have ever lost a child, even, somehow you're out with them. My 9-year-old was with me on a trip. We were actually in a foreign country, and we were in this big marketplace, and she thought, of course, that she was big enough to go over and look at something. And by the time I realized she was gone, I can tell you the anxiety in my heart was just terrible. I mean, it still makes me feel that way when I remember this story. I mean, we're in a strange country. We don't speak the language. She's actually wearing a little Miss Piggy, sweater. So I'm trying to say to people, this little blonde girl, Miss Piggy sweater, things like that. Of course, she was found, but it was frightening. So we can imagine Mary and Joseph and how they are feeling, because Jerusalem is a big place. It's a big city now. It was a big city then. People from all the known world came through Jerusalem. It was on the caravan route. People would come through from east and west. Roman soldiers were everywhere. They patrolled the streets. And a child from the country would not have had the street smarts to know what to do. So you can imagine, as we all can, what they were thinking about and worrying about. When they find him in the temple, and of course they've been to the temple, I have to admit there's been times I thought, well, why didn't they start at the temple? That's where they've been. Why didn't they go there and start? But, the story doesn't tell us this, why they didn't think of that first. But we do know that when they find him, he says, "Did you not know that I would be in my Father's house?" And of course, he is listening and learning and asking questions. And those who are around him, who are the learned scholars of the time, are impressed with this boy. Impressed with him. And so it made me think about what happens with all of us. Jesus stayed behind. He wanted to learn. He wanted to ask questions. I don't know about you, but if you have young people in your lives, whether they're children or grandchildren or your teachers or we're the people of the church who are doing the things for our young people and teaching them as we have promised in their baptism. When children are learning something that they really care about, they're not bored. They're interested, just like we are. And we all have spiritual lives. So when we can engage our young people and each other, we're attentive in the learning. And to me, that seems like a wonderful gift. Maybe the best gift we ever get through our faith on Christmas. Today we read also this reading from Colossians. We don't always read 3 readings, but I wanted to read it today because it talks about gifts that come to us. That we have clothed yourselves with compassion, kindness, humility, meekness, and patience. Bear with one another. Clothe yourselves with love. Live in harmony, which comes because we listen to each other. Let the peace of Christ rule in our hearts. It even tells us to sing. Sing like we did this morning. I've always had a couple people say, I'm not going to sing. Believe me, if I sang, it wouldn't work. But God tells us, sing. Sing the psalms and the hymns and the spiritual songs. Let it be known. Those are gifts that we get, all of us, that we pass on to the younger ones. My friends, I want to especially encourage you at this time of the year when there is a lot of focus on gifts, and of course now we're on the 3rd day of Christmas, and so gifts are being exchanged and all those kinds of things. But the real gifts are what Jesus demonstrates to us in this story. That gift of a spiritual life, where we are encouraged to ask questions. We are encouraged to learn and listen to each other. We are not a church or a denomination that doesn't want the kids to ask. We want them to learn and to grow. We study the Bible in context, not just as rules laid down, but in a way for all of us to grow. So I want all of us to take this in as a gift this year, the best gift for Christmas, which is, of course, Jesus Christ. But then to think about his gift to show us as a boy who learned, who asked those questions, who wanted to know these things. That's the gift for us truly to share with each other and with all of those young ones coming in our lives, in our congregation. That's the greatest gift. Amen.